2311 and Front Row may have just lost all of their charters. Let's get everyone up to speed. How's it going, y'all? My name is Eric. Welcome to Out of the Groove. A lot of off-track news today. This morning, we discussed an allegedly leaked Ram NASCAR video that surfaced on the internet. Now, we're going to talk about the latest in the NASCAR antitrust suit. Major developments today. Let's break it all down. Quick disclaimer, I am not a legal expert. I do follow NASCAR very closely, and I have followed this specific case very closely since the beginning. Let's go back just a few months quickly to get everyone up to speed. During the offseason, 2311 Racing and Front Row Motorsports were granted a preliminary injunction that allowed them to race as chartered teams under the new charter agreement until their antitrust case against NASCAR could be decided or settled. So for the first 14 races of the season, that's how they've operated. 2311 and Front Row operate 3 charters apiece, a total of 6 full-time NASCAR Cup Series entries, but NASCAR had the right to appeal that initial injunction ruling, and they did. A few weeks ago, there was a hearing, and we talked about how the 3 appeals judges seemed to question how the teams were quote-unquote allowed to have their cake and eat it too. The teams were not able to sway those judges, apparently, because today, the U.S. Court of Appeals announced that they were reversing the original injunction decision. Now, Fox Sports reporter Bob Pockrass notes that the teams have a 14-day window where they can ask for the case to be heard by the entire appeals court, and this ruling won't go into effect until 7 days after that deadline. But that means that potentially in 3 weeks, 2311 Racing and Front Row Motorsports could, and almost certainly will, be stripped of their charters. I'm going to do my best to answer some of the frequently asked questions here first. That means that Tyler Reddick, Bubba Wallace, Zane Smith, Todd Gillen, those 6 drivers will not be locked into the field the rest of the season. If more than 40 cars show up to any given Cup Series race, theoretically, one of those cars could fail to qualify. Now, not having charters does not impact these teams' playoff eligibility. As long as these cars attempt to qualify for every Cup Series race, they are playoff eligible, even if they happen to DNQ one week. Now, because these teams will be unchartered, that means they're not eligible for the larger charter payouts. Instead, they'll get their money from the open team's purse, which is considerably smaller. That means that 2311 and Front Row are due to miss out on millions of extra dollars per entry as a result of not having charters. Now, one thing I am not sure of is if some of that money could be recouped by the teams if they were to win the antitrust case against NASCAR. I'm not sure. Jeffrey Kessler, the lawyer representing 2311 and Front Row Motorsports, released this statement today saying, quote, "We are disappointed by today's ruling by the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals and are reviewing the decision to determine our next steps. This ruling is based on a very narrow consideration of whether a release of claims in the charter agreements is anti-competitive and does not impact our chances of winning at trial scheduled for December 1st. We remain confident in our case and committed to racing for the entirety of the season as we continue our fight to create a fair and just economic system for stock car racing that is free of anti-competitive monopolistic conduct." So Jeffrey Kessler is exactly right. While this is potentially a significant blow to the teams in the short term, this ruling has no bearing on the broader antitrust case. In fact, if you go back to that hearing a few weeks ago, the appeals judges even admitted that yeah, the teams might have a decent case here. But this appeal and reversal is all about the injunction. And the focus of the injunction was the release language in the new charter agreement. You know, where NASCAR added ruling that essentially said, if you sign this, you are waiving your rights to sue us. The judge who initially granted the teams their injunction ruled that this kind of release clause was anti-competitive. Thus, he sided with the teams. But the appeals court obviously disagreed. In their decision today, the U.S. Court of Appeals says, quote, "Because we have found no support for the proposition that a business entity or person violates the antitrust laws by requiring a prospective participant to give a release for past conduct as a condition for doing business, we cannot conclude that the plaintiffs made a clear showing that they were likely to succeed on the merits of that theory." Basically, the judges said, hey, release language like that in a contractual agreement is not illegal. This kind of goes back to what the judges were telling Kessler during that hearing a few weeks back. Basically, they said that if you, the teams, wanted to sue NASCAR, you can't also get the benefits of the charter agreement that you refused to sign, especially when the option exists for you to race every week as an open team. That's where the having your cake and eating it too concerns came into play. So that's the details. That's the latest. A big legal victory for NASCAR. That's my takeaway. This moves the needle, puts a bit more pressure on the race teams. Obviously, over the next 14 days, the teams could choose to essentially appeal the appeal, but if they don't, or if they're unsuccessful, then yes, this puts immediate financial pressure on 23XI and Front Row. In 3 weeks, potentially, 23XI and Front Row will no longer have charters. I'm not really worried about these teams failing to qualify for any races. I mean, the odds of 41 or 42 Cup cars showing up to any of the remaining races this season, I think, are pretty low. And even if 41 cars do show up somewhere, Front Row, 23, they're faster than the 44 team or the 66 team most weeks. So I'm not really worried about these teams missing a race. It could happen, but it's very, very unlikely. The bigger concern is the millions of dollars worth of charter payouts these teams now stand to miss out on. Michael Jordan, for example, is a very wealthy guy. He can withstand a short-term loss. The question is, will he want to? Could this ruling put pressure on Jordan and Curtis Polk and Bob Jenkins to come back to the negotiating table? Is there a negotiation to be had? NASCAR has said they have no interest in entering into an agreement with 23XI and Front Row, but we also know that NASCAR is worried about what may get exposed in the discovery stage of this case, which I believe is currently ongoing. So I think if both sides were to sit down, perhaps some sort of settlement could be reached, though right now I believe NASCAR has more leverage. The other question for 23XI Front Row are their contracts with drivers, with sponsors. Part of their original injunction argument is that Tyler Reddick, Bubba Wallace had clauses in their contracts that would allow them to leave if 23XI could not provide them a charter. So theoretically, in 3 weeks, Tyler Reddick could break his contract and walk. I don't think he will. I don't think any of these drivers are going to willingly leave the organization in the middle of the season. But what about sponsor contracts? What about major sponsors like McDonald's or Monster Energy or Love's Travel Stops? Sponsors can be weird, a little unpredictable, fickle, somewhat flaky. Will any of these sponsor contracts be impacted by this ruling, by the teams potentially losing their charters? Again, Michael Jordan, Bob Jenkins, they can deal with this short-term financial loss. But just because they can doesn't mean they will or that they want to. And what happens if sponsors suddenly want to pull out? What if any of their current contracts suddenly get ripped up? There's a lot of uncertainty as a result of today's ruling. Again, pending on if the teams appeal the appeal. And then, of course, there's the question of what happens to these 6 charters. Should NASCAR rescind them? I mean, is Jim France going to go field a car for his guy at Sonoma in a few weeks? Could NASCAR sell these charters to other organizations? This could get messy. I'm gonna need to break out the whiteboard again, the flow chart, to make sure we can piece this whole saga together. A lot of questions as a result of today's ruling. No doubt, though, this is at least a short-term win for NASCAR, a loss for the teams. Where do we go from here? Still anyone's guess. Hopefully I was able to answer some of the more pressing questions. Still a lot of uncertainty, clearly, but let me know what you're thinking down in the comment section below. Leave a like on this video if you enjoyed, subscribe for more NASCAR. I appreciate the support. Earlier today, talked Chase Elliott, Alex Bowman, the 4th Hendrick car. We also talked about Ram potentially re-entering the Craftsman Truck Series. Those rumors, those reports seem realer than ever before. So check out my last video on my channel if you missed it. I appreciate you all tuning in. I will see see you in the next episode. Have a great rest of your afternoon, folks.